Now we're getting to the third part in the book, number 3, the early English Baptists of the 17th century. Okay. The early English Baptists of the 17th century. We ended there in London, where they started with in the church, and we mentioned the word Arminian also. Okay, I'm reading there in the first sentence. In the 16th century, Church of England broke its ties with the church in Rome and reformed itself according to the Word of God. In 1500s, that's with the Reformation. And then we know the basics of the Reformation. I'm not going back there. And within the church there was a group known as Puritans, who felt that the Reformation had not gone far enough. It was interesting to see their ways of thinking. They wanted a more thorough Reformation along the lines of some of the Reformed churches in Europe, like the church in Calvin's church in Geneva. Actually, eventually, some of these Puritans separated from the Church of England, despairing of the possibility of its adequate reform, and formed independent churches following congregational church polity. According to this polity, the polity is by the way of organizing the church, they say. Each local church is autonomous and self-governing under direct lordship of Christ. But how do you think can you go, if you take the Reformation, you say, it's not good enough, you need to go further. Where can you go further?
Yeah, that's...
Do you know something about the Puritans? Or?
I have a rough idea of the Puritans. The Puritans made rules, sometimes made rules to look like they went further. So they would strip the buildings where they gathered from all images and all. They would put and make it extremely modest, and then make the chairs inside the worship services so small that everybody sat uncomfortably, and then that would help them listen to the preachers preaching. And then they would tell the people they're not allowed to wear feathers in their hats. They had very modest clothing. They were supposed to wear this clothes to make them
simple lifestyle.
Yeah, simple lifestyle. So they had a great desire for information, and I think the concepts that they were the first to. There were a lot of important concepts that they were the first to figure out. But I've seen people get an imbalance with things like that. I think there's a sense of moderation when you see your world is wrong. You need to fix it, but you need to also understand that you have a carnal desire to fix too much.
Yeah, actually sometimes you know a lot more of the Puritans than I do. With the church chairs and things, I didn't know that. But sometimes theology become type of objective instead of guidelines to live. So you want to do those things the best way, and that's your religion. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not following God, you're following the theology at the end.
Yeah.
So you start following and then you want to do that perfectly. It's like the Lord. And you're serving that theology And at the end, you don't know that you're not serving God, you're serving the theology. Like now, you believe so strongly in this thing that you need to, as children of God, be guided by God, that you just say, I don't want anything to do now with the government. We are now autonomous. But I mean, because you believe in this issue of God working through, which is true, but it's like an unbalance. You're taking it too far. And then at the end you start serving the theology instead of God. Because God is bringing you to other people also.
I'm literally, because it's my second language, the word autonomous, does that mean completely rejecting all laws from the government, or does that mean independent?
Independent. There is you don't have to, at the end you don't have to look at the government or anything else. You don't respect them really. Because you're not serving the government, you're serving God. So you see, and they want to do it correctly.
Right.
Can I just, in the Baptist view, what's happening? Okay, the laws of the government is according Jesus said what's on the coin. So you do that, but if there's something that is against the biblical view, like homosexuality, the state, the law say that's fine, but we as Baptists say no. So right through the Baptist congregations by the head union, it is a no. So no real Baptist will accept that.
Yeah.
And then each church in the Baptist congregations, in the big union, can, for instance, have, this one can be a bit charismatic, this one can be more stiff and, like that. They can have different ways of doing things, but the basic foundation of faith is the same. That is what they see it in the Baptists, how they deal with that.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, do you understand that they're struggling with a relationship with the church, with the government. They say, no, we're not going to respect you anymore. But that's not actually what the Reformation is.
Was the government still Catholic at that stage?
No, after the Reformation is not Catholic, but remember there are still Catholic churches.
Okay, but the government wasn't Catholic anymore.
And the government was still very much Catholic.
Now I get the view.
Yeah.
That's how now I understand why.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I want to know.
Yeah, it was the
it makes sense why they went and skewed it.
Yeah.
Because you guys haven't broken away from them enough.
Yeah.
They're still running the law system.
But let me give you another example of Puritans. The Puritans said, because it's only grace and the predestination is so strongly in their lives and in their belief system, they said, but well, then it's not necessary to do missions. Because God will choose who He wants, and He will be the one giving the faith to people who He elected.
Okay, so the Calvinists.
So leave missions is not so important.
Isn't that kind of Calvinist?
Because they are pure on that Reformation theology.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, they take it further.
Yeah. And further is not always too good, is it?
In
that context, I mean, that's not what the Bible teaches.
Yeah, at the end, you need to see some of these things in context in your situation. It's life. Christianity is life. It's not rules and theology. It's life. And life, you cannot only put in so pure, because we are not pure.
The government church of that time frame was basically the Anglican Church, if that makes more sense.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It had a different name back then. So it's
But they were still anti the Anglican theology.
yeah, it's very much the Anglican theology. They were a bit better than the current day Anglican Church according to my taste, but
I don't know.
But by the sounds of it, the Puritans were quite heavily leaning towards Calvinism.
yeah, no, they were Calvinists.
I pick that up. I mean,
Oh yes,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, that's true.
No, I'm just
And here they talk about
because I picked that up with Bunyan.
the governance of the church. So governing under the direct lordship of Christ. Christian believers gather together in a properly constituted church. I need to take off my glasses. Meeting have the authority to appoint their leaders and pastors and to order all the affairs of the church according to the word of God, under the direction of the Holy Spirit, and made known to the priesthood of all believers. Leadership issues came out here. It's not that we have the answers. I'm going to try always, but the thing of leadership is not so plain and simple like many people think. Who is the leader? Christ is the leader. But there are people walking in front, and how does the balances work? It's not so easy just to say God is a leader, but there are people organizing things in the structure also. But what is the role of the persons doing it? What is the role of a leader? What is the priesthood? What is the priesthood of all believers?
I always like the word shepherding.
Yeah.
I always seen leadership should be a
It is
stewardship. Yeah, I don't like somebody said to me one day, and it made so much sense. I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, let's see, like you find a stewardess if you're flying Emirates, stewards of Emirates, gives you the food and the drunkies. It's not theirs, it belongs to Emirates. All they're doing is they're just passing it on to you.
Okay. Yeah.
As a leader,
you just pass it.
you're taking from God, you're just passing it on to somebody else. It's not actually yours.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. That's very well said.
That was the best way. That's what you should do. But every Christian should be doing that.
Every Christian, that's
Yes.
So that's the priesthood of all believers, but there are leaders also.
Yes.
So, and how the balances work, we're not going into that now. But they believed in a very strict, Christ is leading us, and through the priesthood of believers and the direction and the autonomy of the church. And they cut out all the rest. And in our brokenness, you cannot cut out all the rest. You need to take in consideration governments, you need to build relationship with them, you need to do a lot of other things.
I would say in these modern days, you can never underestimate the power of pride.
Yes.
Yeah,
Pride
it is
is
the
pride.
corruption of
Yes.
the human nature. Total depravity.
There's a saying, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
That's right. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's a very important thing. So if you have all the authority corrupts you. So it looks like you need a very strong democratic type of leadership, but on the other side you need a theocratic, a God as leader of the community.
Yeah.
So these congregational churches experienced much persecution from the state in England, forcing some of them to seek refuge in Holland, where a more tolerant policy prevailed.
This is around the 1630s.
They don't know. It's about there, I mean, but they don't say it. They don't say it. Why we guess this leadership style causes persecution? Why does this way of doing, creating autonomous congregations, created persecution? Just that we understand a bit of the situation. Why?
Because like we saw in the last lesson, the concept of separation between church and state, that was brand new. People didn't understand this thing that was developing in the theology, because your worldview was generally given unto you and processed for you by the government, and now individuals are trying to form the worldview without the government at all. And so the church is saying, we're going to tell you what's right and wrong, and the government is not allowed to interfere with that. And the government is like, but we've always had the right to say what's right and wrong. Why are you doing this?
Yeah, and you belong to us. You're in my country, you are in this kingdom. You're under our authority. And now you want to do your own thing. It's like a rebellious child.
And what makes the situation worse? What makes the situation worse is that the Episcopalians or the Anglican Church, they actually were a reformed church in the government. That was the government church. But and so they were like the example that they could refer to and say, see, you can do the government is able to reform. Why are you reforming more than the government is reforming?
You say the government is busy to reform.
Because they did change from the Catholic Church.
Yeah, okay, but they didn't give away their authority.
Yeah,
they kept their authority.
No, definitely.
And here is now another authority that say we have another. We not our first authority are not you anymore as government.
Yeah.
And that doesn't land. That plane doesn't land smoothly.
Which is true. I mean, Christ should be a higher authority than your government.
Yeah, it should be, but they're not used to that. As I said.
Yeah, it's like the first and second century, where the Caesars said, okay, all groups that want to gather need to register at the government. And if you don't register at the government and register your religion and get a license to worship whatever you worship, then you're not allowed to worship that thing that you're worshipping. And so by doing that, the churches would then be saying that Christianity is government created. And so they couldn't agree with that, and so they were persecuted.
And they were very much persecuted. That was terrible times. So they fled to Holland and so on. But again, them fleeing to Holland, we can see a bit of God's hand also in that. The persecution made the gospel go into Holland.
Well, that's what Jesus said. He said,
so
they persecute you one time, flee to the next. Not hanging around there, but feel, what this crowd? Get up and get out of there.
In the history, God is still writing the history. He's still involved and he's doing it. But persecution is part of it.
Yeah.
It is, suffering is part of it.
Ek dink baie is 'n kerk te magskraak.
One of the congregational pastors in Holland, John Smith, made contact with some Mennonites, Anabaptists. This influenced him to question whether infant baptism had any basis in the scripture. Now in 1608, he baptized himself. And then his congregation, thus forming what was probably the first English-speaking Baptist church. So his name is quite important. It was the first English-speaking Baptist church. Later on, Smith and some of the followers joined the Dutch Mennonites, but Thomas Helwich and others in the church decided not to join the Mennonites and returned to England to form the Baptist church in London 1612. Now that is maybe important event, Baptist in London, put it this way. It started in 1612, and I'm not sure how important the names are on this page. This was the first of the general or Armenian Baptist churches in England. So let's write here, London Baptist Armenian. Okay, do you have, well, just we need to be clear on what is Armenian means.
I know what it is.
Yeah.
Jacob Arminius was he contested with Calvin's views, and so he said that the predestination wasn't of a sort that would cause God to force you to come to faith. And he also said that the election is conditional with regards to salvation. So he said there's an election, but it's conditional to the reality that you should believe. And then he also said he's not certain about whether people have eternal security or not. And so a lot of his followers then eventually said that there isn't eternal security, but I think also some of his followers today think there is eternal security. So in the Armenian view, that point was a bit shaky.
But in simple terms, it means if salvation is this, say human are here and God is there, who is doing the work of salvation? God is doing the work. That's the Reformation. Saying God came all the distance from there to here to save people. And the Armenian view, there's conditions. The human need to do some things. Otherwise, God cannot save him, will not save him. So, and actually this issue is through all the centuries we have this issue.
Yeah.
It's a very important one to understand the Reformation and say that it's only grace. It's only grace. And even if we say this thing is a real deep faith thing, and I would like to say that because I'm working in Mozambique, sometimes I need to explain the things very, very simple. So excuse me if it's very simple, but I tell the people stories about how does this work. Just to understand the background of this, because it's actually crucial. It's like in Mozambique, a bird is not important. A little bird is not important, and you don't care for a bird. Sometimes the children catch the birds and eat them and so on. And then they're not worth anything. But the children play with them and they catch the birds sometimes. So I make the story. I've heard the story in London about a person in London once, but I adapted the story a little bit. So the boy walks in the road. He caught a little bird in a cage, and he was walking with this cage, and he said, "It's my bird. He wants to go and play with it, but you don't give it water, and you don't give it food. And the way you're going to play it, the bird is going to die. But he don't have a feeling for the bird. He just enjoys to play with the bird. You understand? But the bird will die. So a man comes walking around on the road, and he did a very strange thing. He looked at the bird. He saw what the child is going to do with the bird. He sees there's no food and there's no water in the cage. So he started to feel for the bird. This is a very strange thing. Why would he take the fear of that little bird in that cage and made it his. And he took the suffering of that bird and he made it his. And he felt for that bird and he wanted to do something about that bird, to save the bird. So he asked the boy, give me that bird. Won't you give me that bird? The boy said, no, he caught the bird, he's very proud of that. It's his bird. And he wants to play with it. He said, okay, but I can buy it from you. Now, there in Malawi, money is not worth much, but I mean, 10 kwacha is maybe they can sell the bird for 10 kwacha is about 2-3 cents. Because it's not worth anything. But he said, okay, here's 20 kwacha, I will buy it. And the boy said, no, you cannot buy it, it's my bird. It's not for sale. And he just kept on. He said, no, I want to buy that bird. And he said, here's 50 kwacha. He said, no, okay, here's 100 kwacha. And the boy just said, it's not for sale, are you crazy? And just kept on, and I can make a long story about that. At the end, he get 10,000 kwacha in his hands. Amazing price for
That's a lot of money. That's not, the bird is not worth that.
and far from it. And he said, I've got this 20,000 kwacha. I will buy the bird. At the end, the boy agreed. Took the money, and he took the bird, and he opened the gate, and the bird flew away. And I mean the salvation story. A big price. And a God who cared where we were nothing and not worth caring for. The amazing heart of God. Because you cannot use the word of love in this world to explain God's love, because love has other meanings in this world. We need to explain what love really is so that people can understand what's love. And this is a simple little way of trying to do it. So, and there the bird fly away. So, but the tragic thing is, when that bird is in the cage and the door is open, sometimes we stay in the cage because we are so used to this life and we don't like to leave it. We don't want to change. We don't like that. We are so used to it, and this is what we know. What's outside there is, we don't know. Even if you tell me, I don't trust you, who are you? You understand? So many times God has opened the door, and I can tell for certain out of the Reformed tradition that I can say God is standing before you. He is extending his hand and say, come, I'm giving you it for free.
Yeah.
All you have to do is just say yes and take his hand. You don't have to do anything. Because there's nothing you can do. And even if you try to do good things, you will not manage to do it. And even if you manage it, it won't mean anything for your salvation. Because a relationship with God is not something that you create. It's something that is given to you. Doesn't matter where you are or what circumstances and who you are, it's given to you, you can just take it. I'm trying to explain something of that because this is something that confused.
But it's very crucial as well, because I battle. Because if I am a Christian and I have this idea that I can lose it, it's not a comfortable thought.
Yeah.
So somewhere along the line, I have to make it clear for myself that what does the scriptures actually say about it? And also show me some very profound scriptures. For I hold you in my hand, and no one can take you out of my hand. I have sealed you with my Holy Spirit. There is so much scripture that verifies this eternal, amazing gift of salvation that God gave us. But the thing is, with the salvation comes a responsibility.
I can explain a little bit of that also, but I mean, it's not you get the salvation, and the salvation will change you,
Yes.
then you're not living, the Spirit is living through you. And so a lot of changes will happen. But the thing is, what happens is through God in you. And at the end, if the vine that's in the branch that's in the vine can't bear fruit if it's not in the vine. So the relationship causes the fruit. Because that juice is coming into you, it changes you, and it can bring you fruit. And if something happens to your life, you don't have anything to be proud of, because it's not you doing it. That idea, I mean.
Yeah.
But things will happen. If there's no fruit, something is wrong. If somebody don't have a calling and don't do anything in a Christian life, something is wrong. If the Spirit of the Lord is in you, you will be my witnesses. There's no doubt. It is not. And there's a lot of things coming with it. But for me, it's very important because so many people have this idea: I need to be a better Christian.
But that's the other thing. What's being a witness? Is that doing Christian duties?
We can talk a lot about that. It's actually, but it's not on.
Yeah, no, but
I think we will in the mission. We will talk a lot about that department of how do you witness and why you witness and from what do you witness and what happens in you. I think we will do a lot in the mission part, but for now, it's just very important for the issues of the history, because this is the thing that comes back all over and over and over again. People try to do things, and they need to do this rule or this thing and this thing to be a Christian.
For me, the tension between the Calvinist and the Arminian is a tension that came about because of a misunderstanding of Scripture. I think they were influenced by some Gnostic worldviews on how to read certain passages in the Bible. So I think they're both pretty close to what the Bible says, but I think the Arminian and the Calvinist view are wrong when it gets to the core of the soteriology. And I think they usually misunderstand the depravity of man.
Yeah, that's very important.
I think both of them misunderstood the depravity of man. I can explain how I understand it, but I don't know if we have time. I think we will do that another. Or do we want to talk about it?
Because the depravity of man, it links with this issue. I mean, we can talk. I think we will finish before time. So yeah, that here.
Okay, so how I understand it, I think the bird in the cage thing is going to help for the illustration. The cow. At the beginning of the Reformation, they discovered this concept that we are saved by grace through faith. But how exactly that's put together was misunderstood. They didn't know how that actually works. Because they understand that the bird gets set free, not because it deserves it, but because God so loves it. But exactly how that happens, they didn't understand. So, in the Gnostic worldview, God is a deterministic God. He is a fatalistic God. So he says what's going to happen.
In which worldview?
In the Gnostic worldview.
Yeah.
So because they were studying some of the church fathers that were influenced by the Gnostic worldview, they also got this worldview that the bird inside the cage is actually dead in such a way that God not only needs to open the cage, he also needs to make the bird alive. So the Calvinists said that what God does is he first makes the bird alive, then he opens the cage. And then the Arminians says he the Calvinist says he first opens the cage and, okay, but they got that mixed up. So that at the end of the day, the Calvinists, they made because of that misunderstanding, they made the concept of God saving in such a way that we as people, we're not entirely human, we're like robots. We need to be turned on like a robot. And that's the whole Bible speaks of God calling us and speaking to us like we've got a
choice in that.
An ability to decide. So what happened at the cross was Jesus did the work for us, and so He made the cage open. So the cage for all the birds inside the cage, millions of birds inside the cage, any one of them can decide to fly out, but they don't know the cage is open.
Yes.
So they need to be informed about, hey, look, there's a door.
Exactly.
So that's like appropriation.
That's the good news.
That's the good news. Hey, the door's open.
So appropriation works. I like the word appropriation because somebody explained it to me like this. Let's say your grandfather dies and he says you're inheriting like $1 million or $1 billion. And now, all you need to do is sign the document. So, but you're not allowed to work for the $1 billion. Now you sign the document. Now somebody says, oh, "You signed the document. That's working. You're not allowed to get the $1 billion." Now that's a Calvinist worldview of
Puritanism.
Yeah. So that fight is more about signing the document, doing work in order for the things that you've inherited, and that's not actually the case because there's a difference between merit and appropriation. And in the Bible, in Romans in chapter 3, I think Romans in chapter 3 for me explains the concept of appropriation because it says, it first explains that you're not saved by merit, and then it asks you, now by what law are you saved? So I think that law is talking about is a appropriation law. So do you need to appropriate it by performing some ritual? No, you appropriate it by the law of faith. So when you have believed, you've done more than enough appropriation. You do not need to be circumcised in order to go to heaven. Or like some people say, you need to be baptized in order to go to heaven. There's no such thing. It's only faith. It's the law of faith.
Yeah, and at the end, what faith asks of you is everything. So there's no limit on that also.
Yeah.
God is giving 100% grace, and your reaction is also 100%. And He's asking everything, but it's not you doing it. That's the thing that's sometimes difficult to put in logic. You have to live it. Let me just, we're going a bit sideways, but I think that's also, it helps. I go to Mozambique. I'm traveling with a car that's falling apart at 42 degrees Celsius, and the heater is stuck. And 8 hours on 150 kilometers, so bad is the road. And you're already a month there going, eating foods, you're sick, you're tired, you are wasted. So it becomes dark later on, you're out of cell phone reach, there's no signal, going to the bush, gets stuck, wants to dig out. 11 o'clock at night, I reach a little clay building with 40 people waiting for me to preach to them. And I tell the Lord, there is no way that I can preach to these people now. In the first place, it's not my way of working. I cannot just work with people if I don't know where they are. What is the things that you are already doing here, and the issues that you want us to talk? And I don't have the energy to work with that 11 o'clock at night. It's pitch dark, you can't see the people, there's a little candle with a little flame like that in front. That's the light in the building. And you don't see the people in front of you, you can't read their faces, you don't know where they are spiritually, whatever. I tell the Lord, sorry, tonight it's impossible. And the Lord answered me. He said, my son, you know, just love them. I said, Lord, there's no way that I can love them tonight. I'm so tired, there's no way. And you know what that one did, and you know what that one did, and you know what's the attitude. I cannot love them tonight. It's impossible. And then the Lord answered again. He said, my son, you know, it's not your love, it's my love. You're not able to love. Just put your hand in mine. I just knew that's what he's telling me. So then I replied, but I don't even want to put my hand in yours tonight. That's how I feel. But you see that relationship, and just standing in his grace, you can be so honest because you don't have to be good. You can be a broken person before everything. And you can tell him anything. You can be brutally honest. He's not going to tell you. So now, but I will put my hand in yours. I don't know what to tell you. There's no way that I can do anything. And I stood up there, and when I stood up, an elderly person there at the back of the building jumped up, and he came running towards me, and he hugged me, and he dancing with me there in front. He was so glad to see me. He said, but because 15 years ago you teach us in 3 days to be missionaries. And I never had the time to tell you what happened after you left. We didn't see each other from that point. I just want to have this big desire to tell you what happened. How the people came at night because they are ashamed to come at day to ask me about this Jesus.
Yeah.
And he started telling those stories. And I just stood amazed. And I just see how the Lord is working. And then I started telling stories, inspired by his stories. 4 o'clock in the morning, no one of us wanted to go and sleep. We just continued till daybreak, telling stories about what God did. When he saw I cannot do anything, he inspired me with the people sitting there. Because that's what I needed. And at the end, they were ministering to me, not me to them. And I saw miracles happen, how people getting excited about God, and how the message reached others who were sitting there who never heard something like that before in their lives. And you can see how the Lord works and enthusiastic and how they started to participate. And I stood there like a spectator looking at what is God doing. I didn't do anything, but I did a lot. You understand? You cannot put it logically. There's a point where your faith and your life in Christ is not logic. You cannot make a theology of that, because you will walk into walls. And you cannot. But that relationship, experiencing God working when you don't have any energy left, you just look at a spectator of what God is doing. And your unwillingness and your without any capability in you. And sometimes you just realize it. Other times you don't realize it. you are doing things and people accept what you do and you think you can do something. But nothing that you do is from you. Nothing. It's not you. It's him working. So that thing, there's no way that I want to do anything here, because that little that I need to do, I will fail in. If it's not 100% him saving me, then that's, and the Arminians say, no, you are responsible for some part of it.
Yeah.
In simple words.
Yeah.
There's a difference in entering a hotel and inheriting a hotel.
Yeah. Yeah, so one of the congregation pastors, Orland John Smith, and so I've read that, and this was the first of the general or Arminian Baptist churches in England. Now they have Arminian way of thinking and doing, and they expected their members to take part in their salvation, in a small part. Not that we cannot we can stand outside and say, "Oh, but that's not wrong. That's wrong." But I mean, we've seen that through the history. Judgment will help you nowhere, and the Lord is using a broken church to save people.
That's the profound thing.
That's an amazing thing.
That's a miracle in itself.
Where could anyone in these broken churches of today do anything for God? No. But people come to the Lord. He's doing His grace through this broken system. By 1638, there was also some particular or Calvinistic Baptist churches in London. But that is a little bit later on. There's Arminian, and then 38 is also Baptist, but we said they say Calvinian or Calvinistic. Now, Calvinistic say God do us 100%.
Sure.
So they are different from the Armenian churches.
Can I comment on that?
Yes.
They called them general Baptists and particular Baptists because they were referring to the atonement and whether it was limited
Yes.
or not. So with the general Baptists, they thought that atonement was general. In other words, Jesus died for everybody on the cross. But the particular Baptists, they said the blood of Jesus only flowed for particular people. So
They elected.
Yeah, they elected.
So they both pretty much have a different view, but they end up at the same point, actually. And that's why I have a problem with actually both of them.
We will have problems with the Lord, and they will have problems with us.
Exactly.
That's always.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, I just want to say one thing. That's always the interesting thing about history. We always disagree with the people in history, but in reality, they would disagree with us.
Yeah. I just want to finish this paragraph. These seem to have developed from a congregational church which came to reject infant baptism in favor of the practice of believers' baptism. I think the Armenian Calvinistic issue, we understand that. The particular Baptists held the more Calvinistic understanding of the doctrine of election and predestination because it's the particular atonement. Yeah. As you said. Where did you learn all these things?
I have a love for theology. I just
On your own?
On my own, I consume it.
You read the books?
Yeah.
Yes. Amazing. I like that. Because these things I had to study again to understand. And I don't know that.
No, we get together often. We have theological debates with each other.
It's amazing.
It's fun.
During the early 1600s, English society was troubled by the growing rivalry between the king and parliament. That was now the government history. Parliament was dominated by Puritans, interesting, who wanted to limit the power of the king and reform the church. The king, on the other hand, rejected the moves to limit his own power to make changes in the government of the church. These tensions eventually led to the Civil War, 1642 to 46. which was won by the parliamentarians and the leadership of Oliver Cromwell. Yeah, that name is also important. Baptists generally supported Cromwell enthusiastically. They enjoyed a large measure of freedom under his rule, and the number of Baptist churches grew rapidly. So that is after the war. Then we get the war here in 42 to 46. Let's just write there 1642 to 46. The war, and then the Baptist churches grew rapidly. Okay. It has been estimated that by 1660 there were roughly 300 general and particular Baptist churches. After the death of Cromwell, his son who succeeded him as Lord and Protector of England, but he did not have his father's ability. The question of how the state church should be reformed has not been resolved, and many new strange sects abounded. You see, that's freedom can also create the fertility, the ground for a lot of sects, because everyone can do what they want. And if you have a great idea and you have the gift to influence people, something starts. So then you have already bring a difficult thing to normal believers. How do I distinguish between the truth and the lie? Because a lot of lies come into it. And they don't have the books to read about doctrine, etc. And they're confused. Or they believe the nearest person and they follow him. So that's what happened. There's a lot of strange sects that started. The English people were fearful that the country would sink into chaos and disorder. And so in 1660 the Parliament invited Charles II, the son of the beheaded Charles I, to return to the country as king. This resulted in the restoration of the monarchy of the Church of England. So they start again the Church of England, 1660, the Church of England. Okay. It also resulted in renewed persecution of Baptists and other non-conformists who refused to worship the church in the Church of England as established by law. Because this Church of England is also infant baptism and so on. So there are some differences between, and then they started persecuting, and yeah, the brokenness of our history will always be there. And yeah, it's a monarchy and the Church of England. The Church of England is the only one that's legalized to be church. It's only, and then the Baptists suffered because of that. There you can see, JC, again, the different Protestant churches, but now fighting one another and even killing one another. They come from the same basis, salvation in Christ. Yeah. It's terrible how we confuse things sometimes. One of those who suffered after the restoration was John Bunyan, the pastor of the Baptist church in the village of Bedford. Between 1660 and 76, he spent most of his time in jail.
Yeah.
Bunyan was a lot of time, that is 16 years, and most of that 16 years he was in jail. During this time in prison, he wrote several books. The most famous was Pilgrim's Progress. Did you read Pilgrim's Progress?
Yes.
Yeah. It is an amazing book.
Yeah. I would finish it, I'm still busy.
Yeah. But it is a book you read slowly. It's an amazing book. If you can find this book, read it. It's worthwhile. Become a Christian classic, translated into many languages and widely read to this day. I don't know when it was written, this book, but to this day it's still reading. we're still reading it. This time of open persecution came to an end with the accession of the throne of James II, who was a Catholic and allowed greater freedom of worship. He's the leader, but he gives freedom of worship to any denomination, chiefly for the benefit of his fellow Catholics. I don't know what they mean by that. The English people were fearful, however, that the Catholic king would take the country and its church back to Rome. So in 1688, Parliament disposed of James II and invited Protestant William of Holland and his wife Mary to become King and Queen of England. Yeah, so now we are already on the next paper. 1688. Okay, we say that is now freedom in England. Okay. Okay, this was followed by Act of Toleration in 1689. And put it there also, toleration. Okay, in England. Which gave a large amount of religious freedom to non-conformists. After a century of strife, conflict, and much persecution, at last the Baptist churches enjoyed a measure of peace and quiet. In the meantime, they had experienced considerable growth and were recognized as a significant non-conformist Christian group. What does non-conformist mean?
They don't follow the order of the government in the exact way the government presented it.
They believed in their faith and they stayed with it even if the government pressurized them.
Yeah.
They didn't budge. Alongside the Congregationalists, Presbyterians, Quakers, and a few other smaller groups that were active in that time.
So the Quakers were already there in the
Yes, I was also surprised.
Yeah, that's quite a way back.
Okay, but the next chapter we do something more about that. Can go a bit quicker now with the English Baptists after 1700. After bravely enduring various trials and tribulations throughout the 7th century and finally gaining a measure of peace and freedom, it is strange to relate that in the first half of the 18th century, the Baptist churches experienced periods of decline spiritually and vitally. Now that is also that also happens a lot in churches. 1700. And we can say freedom, and that led to decline. That happens. That's something we learn in history. The effect of being comfortable make that your faith and your convictions is not so important anymore to you, and you start to decline as spiritual, and that happens to individuals and also denominations and even governments. Somebody make it draw this graph. Help me to understand a little bit of this effect. Say for example this graph. This is your stress level. This axis. And this axis is your growth. Spiritual growth, your development as a person. And in any level, I mean in science, in everything. So they say there is if there's no stress, if you have zero stress, that is the 0 That is the zero line. Put the zero line here. Your growth is negative. This is scientifically in leaders, you get this in management teachings in universities. They tell you this. If your comfort level is zero, if your stress level is zero, your growth is negative. That means you are going backwards. You don't grow. As soon as your stress level starts, your growth starts. You start growing when there's difficulties. Then you learn things and something happens. And then you get to you cross the zero line and you become positive in your growth as the stress level increases. And then you get to a point where it levels off. Now the stress level is quite high. And then the stress level gets too high. You come down and then you go back into negative. So, and that happens with the church also. When things are too comfortable, sometimes the church is declining. Not firstly in membership, but firstly in your convictions. And later on in your membership, and later on, the last thing that stands sometimes is your finances, interestingly. And then people start with, the whole church is doing fundraising to survive. You understand? So that's the last phase of a church in decline. And then you go, but you're already declining. So you're already there. And sometimes it's because of comfort.
That's quite interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
But if your stress levels are too high,
It's also problematic.
then you get, you can't grow. So it is, and then that teaches you also, even in church, if you are working in your ministry somewhere, you need your members to be stressful about all the things wrong in the world. Otherwise, why are they there?
I've experienced it personally that people are more fervent about their religion, more zealous, when they understand there's a force outside of church that's challenging the church and seeks to make an end of what you are doing.
But I also experience, I really experience that there's some churches that the congregation is actually forcing the who we call it the pastor, that he doesn't preach bad things in the Bible. So the warnings and the judgments, it must be always good things to inspire them.
Yeah.
And that is so wrong, because how do they know what is wrong? But I experienced that in a church, that the pastor up at his wing, because he just wants comforting stuff, and that is so, you can't do that.
And it's selfishness also, because you are busy with the people sitting in the church and you want to encourage them. You're just busy with your own congregation.
Exactly.
And the congregation that's busy with himself is dying.
Yeah.
If the congregation is not living out his faith out there, and that is their main objective, why are they existing?
This is back to yesterday's message.
So
Protest.
and if you start moving out there, you move in a lot of stress.
Yeah.
But because they avoid the stress and don't understand the opportunities in the stress, and not being positive about being uncomfortable, things like that. Now they keep to themselves, and you don't tell anybody he's doing wrong, or he's selfish or anything. You don't.
Yeah, they doesn't want to hear.
You're not prophetic anymore.
Exactly.
And creating uncomfort. And now you need that balance also. not over stressful, but stressful in such a way that you find the optimum growth. I can talk a lot about this, but I think in the mission part we're going to touch a lot of these things also. It was the period of the Enlightenment. Now, this is also other issues that we need to write down, because Enlightenment, that is now Enlightenment. We didn't write we need to write here the Arminian Calvinism issues. Okay. Now, the Enlightenment, you know what the Enlightenment is? The age of reason, the things that we are struggling to this day, rationalism, where the European culture as a whole is deeply influenced by the spirit of rationalism, and traditional ideas in areas of politics, science, philosophy, medicine and theology were subjected to critical inquiry. Now, critical inquiry in itself is not a bad thing. It's a very, very necessity. You need to criticize. You need people to be very busy with you. But what happened in the Enlightenment is, in the church, this led to rejection of miracles, the incarnation, the resurrection, the Trinity, and many other traditional beliefs which it was felt could not be scientifically explained. Enlightenment. Well, that's endowment, actually. We know we're struggling with that still today. Even we are in the second phase of it, the postmodernism and so on. But for me, the basis is still the same. It's still that science can't explain it, so it doesn't fit in anymore. And people get confused. We need to understand it. People are really confused. They don't have direction. It's true. They don't know what is the truth. So, if they say Jonah can't be in a fish, it's impossible. And the Bible says it can be in a fish, and nobody comes and tell them and help them, they get confused.
There's so much things in real life that scientifically cannot be explained.
Yeah.
So there's so much things. Now, why do they want to try and explain the Bible? You know what I'm saying? Why do they try? They want to explain the Bible, but there's so much other things they can't explain anyway. So yeah.
Okay. And then they say many General Baptist churches become Arian or Unitarian, doubting the full deity of the Lord Jesus Christ. Particular Baptist churches remained more orthodox, but many of them slid into hyper-Calvinism. You see, now the reaction of the church is sometimes orthodox, and they're also hiding. The church started hiding. They like the ostrich putting his head under the soil and don't tell the world the truth. They're hiding because their message is not so accepted anymore in the world, and now it looks like they feel they can't give it anymore or something, and they're hiding it instead of proclaiming it, stressing the doctrines of human inability and divine predestination to the extent, that's now the hyper-Calvinism, stressing the doctrines of human inability, the divine predestination to the extent that they criticized evangelical and missionary efforts. So low was the level of spiritual life in the Baptist churches that when the evangelical awakening began through the preaching of the Anglican ministries, there's John Wesley, George Whitefield and others, there was little interest in Baptist circles. So when the awakening started, they were so low and so confused that they maybe didn't even trust it Whitefield and the other preachers who started telling him, but you must go back to this is still the truth. And it affects our lives this and this way, because that's what we preached. I remember, I think it was Whitefield, he was preaching there in England at the docks, and he's on honesty and things like that, and how Christianity affects your honesty, and that the people felt so guilty, but all of the dock workers were thieves, they were corrupt. So, but the Spirit worked in them and they came to the Lord. So now they bring back all the things they stole. So they came back with all those things and they filled up all the warehouses of the docks. So much that the government later told them, if you still have things, keep it, we don't have place for it. Because of the honesty through the preachers. It's the conviction of the Lord in their hearts. It's about the change in their lives again. The late awakening, as they call it.
Today the message is you can live your best life now.
Yeah. But look at that situation and what happened there, and look at South Africa. We need to see something for our time.
Yeah.
We need to see something. And link that with our reform beliefs. We cannot do anything but the Lord can.
That is.
Yeah.
He can change it. So history becomes quite a... what is the relationship between faith and science? It's a nice question to talk about, because that's what the Baptist Church was struggling with. What is the relationship? How does it work? Does God want science, or is it against God? Things like that. We don't have time now to go into that, but it's so interesting because God created us in His image to create. So science is a normal outflowing of God in us. The only problem is we took God out of the science. He's not in it anymore, he's out of it. So.
Well, Paul's opening argument to the Romans was, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness of those who suppress the truth of God in unrighteousness. For what has clearly been made known to you by creation, you have rejected. So his opening argument was creation.
And we have His image to be creators. And we create new things through science.
I can't remember now the guy's name, but there's a person at Stellenbosch University. I can't remember his name. That's a scientist, but he came to God, and I put the videos on it, that he shows that as the creation happened and the time frames is actually laid exactly like that in the science of the world, in the layers and everything. It's also what I can't remember is, if it comes to mind, I will read it, but the video series is the awesome.
I think there's a big challenge for Christian scientists today. A big challenge. Because they need to bring God in the science again, and that's not easy, because they have to find God again in the science. And that's not so easy. They need to take all the proofs of revolution and evolution and all those things into consideration, because that's how science works, and then find God again in it. And then
fantastic.
And bring and see how does creation and these things, how does there need to be a new science actually?
Exactly.
Must
And
be
how they
reformed
proved
from
that, but it's fantastic to look at it, because they proved the flood was worldwide. The layers of that guy is awesome. And he's doing it fantastic. That he's proving also that this millions of years that they say is not true. Not according to the layers of the earth and how the creation was there, the fossils they found. It is absolutely fantastic. There's no thing of you were ape before and now you're human. It's not there.
Yeah, but even scientists are disproving that. What's happening now is what they call a it's basically what's happening now is because scientists and occult or astronomy or spiritual belief was separated during the time of the Enlightenment. What's happening now is it's being infused again. So we're moving into a time period where in my art I'm actually tackling this concept. So we're moving into an age now where science and mystic Gnostic beliefs are starting to infuse again. So science is getting back to the roots of a higher source, but it's pagan.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, because once that happens, it opens itself up again to
something else.
And I mean, we can talk a lot about this. If I, who am not a scientist, look at what scientists telling me, and I look at what the Bible telling me, the things don't link up. And I'm not able to bring them together. You get confused. And because science is built, looks like, I cannot say these things actually, but it looks like it's built on so much constructs and theories which became science, that it's so difficult for somebody who's not into science to understand these things. The way I understand, just my personal way of looking at these things, is that there are things, what happens is that God is much greater than us.
We are finite.
We are finite.
Yes, we are finite.
And He's infinite.
Yes.
So I cannot understand everything of God.
Exactly.
So some things that looks contradictory to me, God can bring together in His wisdom. It is together. On this stage, I need to accept that one and this one, because both are true sometimes. Sometimes there are constructs and I don't understand and so on. But that's the way I understand it. Because of the infinite God and my capacity that's so limited. There's so many things I don't understand. So I rest in understanding that God knows. I cannot understand. I'm confused with a lot of things. There's so many things I don't understand. I'm so confused with some things in life. And it's good sometimes for myself to just accept it. Because I believe in the Bible. And this is a great challenge and opportunity for Christians. Science and the Bible and faith. We need to find creative ways through God's creativeness in us to give the world faith again. Because it's losing its faith. On this stage, anyone I ask anywhere in whatever congregation, I ask the question, is the world influencing the church more than the church influencing the world? Which one is stronger? Everyone tells me the world is influencing the church on this stage more than the church influencing the world. So these things and the church is in decline.
I think that about which one is influencing the church. There's this church back home, because they started in the United States, and when they came back home, they were recruiting like all the young people, young Christian. They pretend like they are Christian. The church is called Arja Seat now. I don't know if it used to be, but Arja Seat here in Peterborough, they call it the Saint of Last Day.
Okay, yeah.
Yes. So back home, what they were doing, they can just they will take it like 500 people, young people. They will send them to United States. They will teach them. They will just tell you that when they just come and evangelize and do that, they will tell you about Christ. They will tell you everything about the Bible. And then when they send them to United States, now they mix the now with science. That's what they do. And then they will give you everything you want in life. And then as well, those guys will come back the young people. Because they've been initiated. Then their mission is come and initiate others.
Yeah, discipleship.
So that's why we are saying which one is trying to influence the thing. So the world is that they pretend like they're Christian, and then after that they add on top of what they like teaching people like in the open air like this. Then there is other stuff behind this. Yeah. Now what they are giving them is science. And also other science, they offer science, So,
yes, thank you very much. We need to